Greetings, my friends. I want to thank you all for subscribing. I want to thank all of my channel members for supporting me in this endeavor to save pop culture. And if you are not subscribed, please consider supporting this channel. We need you. Thank you. Greetings, my friends. I am Dictor Van Doomcock, the future ruler of Earth, and I am here today to settle an old question that has dogged Blade Runner for decades now. Is Deckard a replicant? Fans have debated this a long time, and when I recently saw this argument break out on Twitter yet again, it severely annoyed me, and so I decided, rather than keep going back and forth on various points, which is a huge waste of time that I don't have, I would make a video examining the issue and settling it once and for all. My friends, there can be no doubt. Deckard is a replicant. In this video, I will make the case why Deckard is a replicant, and I will also demolish the arguments I was being presented with to the contrary. Deckard is a replicant, and here is the proof. Let's start out with the strongest piece of evidence in Blade Runner, the unicorn dream. It is established early on in Blade Runner that the latest model replicants created by the Tyrell Corporation are provided with false memories. These memories are quite specific and are probably unique to each replicant for purposes of identification. In a very moving scene, we see the dramatic emotional effect of these false memories when Deckard toys with Rachel, telling her about her own personal memories, in particular relating to her own memory of a spider laying eggs in her web outside of Rachel's window, only to be devoured by her own children when they hatched. This is a very powerful scene because in a sense it strips Rachel down naked. It's an enormous violation of Rachel, this notion that her own mind, her own memories, don't belong to her, that this policeman could access her file and have access to her most private moments. She is traumatized not only by the revelation that she is a replicant after all, a fact she was never privy to, but by the humiliation of a man being able to read her innermost thoughts as if she were a book on his shelf. It is established in this scene that replicants have false memories implanted in their minds, and that these false memories are available for anyone to view that has access to their files. At one point in the movie, Deckard sits at the piano plinking out a little tune and has a memory of seeing a unicorn charging through the forest. An impossible memory, since unicorns don't exist. Deckard emerges from his daydream and gets on with things, but we're not finished with the unicorn yet. In the final moments of Blade Runner, the police detective Gaff tells Deckard,
"It's too bad she won't live, but then again, who does?"
Deckard realizes that Gaff is on to Rachel, who is on the run for being an escaped replicant and who has been hidden in Deckard's apartment. Deckard hurries home, only to find that Gaff has been there. And not only that, Gaff let Rachel live, and he left Deckard a message in the form of an origami unicorn. The implication here is clear. Gaff has seen Deckard's file and knows about the implanted unicorn memory and knows that Deckard is a replicant. Now what about the unicorn? Was the unicorn dream a retcon added in subsequent versions of Blade Runner, or was the unicorn concept there all along? In other words, was Deckard having this memory intended from the start, or did director Ridley Scott add this part later because he thought it would make a fun little twist? My friends, Ridley Scott intended for the unicorn reverie to be there the entire time. Toward the end of production, in the first week of January 1982, Ridley Scott spent a day filming unicorn footage at Black Park, England. It was filmed with an overcranked camera to present the footage in slow motion to denote it as a memory, a daydream, or some other altered mode of consciousness, and Scott was pleased with it. Unfortunately, the original footage in the original sequence was cut from the film because the production company Tandem was unhappy with it. The scene confused them. Why was this unicorn suddenly in the middle of Blade Runner? They wanted that scene out of the original cut, and because the production had been contentious and there was already tension between Ridley Scott and Tandem, In fact, Tandem had fired Scott at one point, but he just ignored them and kept working, so they let it go. Scott obliged them by making the cut. But there was no doubt that from the start, Ridley wanted the unicorn shot in the film while Deckard sat at the piano, which is why he was determined to put the unicorn back into the film with his director's cut. Author and esteemed Blade Runner expert Paul Salmon, in the third edition of his book Future Noir, writes, Scott also very much wanted to reinstate his beloved unicorn shot. This soon-to-be controversial scene was filmed during post-production in 1982 and had been originally intended to take place while Deckard was in his apartment playing his piano, drunkenly as he daydreams about a horned horse. Scott intended this reverie to have a chilling relevance at film's end, with Gaff leaving behind a tinfoil origami unicorn to signify his knowledge of Deckard's innermost thoughts. Unfortunately, when they were assembling the director's cut, they discovered that the original unicorn footage, which had been cut into an entire completed sequence, was missing. And they wound up just cutting some stuff from Legend into Blade Runner as a replacement for the missing unicorn footage. According to Terry Rawlings, the editor of Blade Runner, the original unicorn sequence went like this. It was essentially a series of various intercuts. These began when Deckard picks up some photographs off the piano, swivels around on the piano bench, and then leans back against the piano itself. Then Ford began looking at a picture, and flash. You had a quick cut of this unicorn running through a forest. Then that went away, and Deckard carried on looking at this snapshot. Next came another shot of the unicorn, coming right up to the camera. It then shook its head, and as it shook its head, I cut back to Ford shaking his head, like he was shaking this thought out of his mind. Then Harrison laid down those pictures, and the scene continued as you see it now, with Deckard picking up and taking Leon's photo over to the Esper. So basically, the substance of the original unicorn sequence displayed Deckard going through photographs and saying to himself, memories, you know? As if memories of his own were coming back. That was sort of the idea. Deckard's own thoughts were being triggered by those photos. He mulled those images over and then shook the memories out of his head. The way the sequence was originally constructed, it's even more clear with the juxtaposition of the old black and white family photos that I maintain are obviously fake, and the reverie of the unicorn, that the unicorn itself is a memory as well. A memory that doesn't make sense. A memory that Deckard is trying to shake because it is discordant. Deckard doesn't know where this weird memory is coming from, and he doesn't want to think about it. There can be no doubt that this single piece of evidence is compelling enough to make the case fairly conclusively that Deckard is a replicant. But of course, there is more evidence, a lot more. Replicants have an obsession with photos in Blade Runner, largely because they hunger for a past they never really had. Leon risks getting arrested to go back to the Hunter-Bosser Hotel to retrieve what replicant Roy Batty deems his precious photos. Rachel rather poignantly presents a photo of herself as a little girl with her mother on their porch as proof that her memories are real. And Deckard, a man who is by no means presented as sentimental, has a bunch of old black and white family photos on his piano. Why nothing more recent? Why such ancient relics? In the original theatrical release of Blade Runner, Deckard's voiceover goes,
Sushi. That's what my ex-wife called me. Cold fish.
Now obviously it is my contention that Deckard's memory of his ex-wife is as phony as his memory of the unicorn, but it does speak to his character that he is emotionally cold. Sushi, a cold fish. When you think about it, that's a great cover story to explain why Deckard doesn't have normal emotions. Ah, that's just Deck. He keeps his emotions to himself. He's always been that way. And yet, here at home, he surrounds himself with photos, which is yet another symbolic signifier that Ridley Scott considered Deckard to be a replicant. Indeed, the fact that Deckard is a replicant becomes even more undeniable when you consider that the script itself makes it quite clear that Deckard is a replicant in an early Fancher/People's draft of the script from 1981. Many of those who reject the obvious and contend that Deckard is human like to point out that Hampton Fancher, the original writer of the script, also sides with them. Fancher does not like the idea of Deckard being a replicant and has publicly stated it to be so. And indeed, in the original novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, Deckard is definitely human. So how can you say that Deckard in Blade Runner is human if the writer and the source material disagree? Quite simply, decades of film theory that started in Cahiers du Cinéma, the film journal started by Francois Truffaut, have established quite firmly that the director of a film is considered to be its author. That's why Raiders of the Lost Ark is a Steven Spielberg film, not a Lawrence Kasdan film. And Blade Runner is a Ridley Scott film, not a Hampton Fancher, David Peoples film. It is the director who has ultimate artistic say over a film. The script is a blueprint and a crucial one, but it is the director who interprets and shapes the script into the film that he wants to make. It is very clear and thoroughly documented that Ridley Scott says Deckard is a replicant. He was from the beginning, and the unicorn shot was the dead giveaway all along. But regardless of the fact that Deckard is human in Dick's novel, and regardless of the fact that Fancher rejects the notion that Deckard is a replicant, the fact of the matter is not only does the director say Deckard is a replicant, but Fancher did too. In a draft of the script from 1981, Fancher and Peoples explicitly state that Deckard is a replicant at the end of the script in a voiceover. Here is the scene. Deckard notices it. His eyes narrow just a little. He reaches in his pocket, pulls out the unicorn. Deckard puts the tinfoil unicorn on the dash. A flicker of a smile crosses his face. Cut to exterior woods day. Deckard's car bullets through the woods in a fury of speed and music. We back off it and up, past whizzing branches, over the treetops, losing the car as we soar over what is suddenly a vast forest spreading to infinity. Enormous music. Deckard's voiceover. I knew it on the roof that night. We were brothers, Roy Batty and I. Combat models of the highest order. We'd fought in wars not yet dreamed of, in vast nightmares still unnamed. We were the new people. Roy and me and Rachel. We were made for this world. It was ours. Trees explode past us in a rage of branches as we dip and swerve, and that's when the spinner looms into view, zooming right at us, then tilting and yawing off in hot pursuit with Gaff at the controls. Credits are rolling. God help us all. Fade out. The end. Now this draft was by Hampton Fancher and David Peoples, dated February 23rd, 1981. So at this point, we've established beyond dispute that Ridley Scott not only intended to have the Deckard unicorn memory linkage to the origami unicorn, with the clear message being Gaff had seen Deckard's file and knew his inmost thoughts, but Scott even had the writers include this explicitly in the script at one point. I don't know if Fancher forgot about this, or if he was unhappy with the change and so rejects it from his personal dojo, but regardless of his attitude, it doesn't change the fact it was not only in Ridley's head at the time, but in the pages of the script as well. Ridley Scott says Deckard is a replicant. It doesn't matter if Hampton Fancher says he isn't. Hampton Fancher is not the author of the film. And also, many people have told me Harrison Ford says Deckard's human. Who cares what the actor says? Harrison Ford had nothing to do with writing the movie. He doesn't know any more than anyone else does. He doesn't certainly know more than Ridley Scott. There are numerous other clues that Deckard is a replicant, and here's the third most compelling argument. They say that eyes are the windows to the soul, and that is very clearly the case in Blade Runner. Time after time in Blade Runner, the known replicants are shown with orange glowing eyes. The owl, which is artificial, has orange glowing eyes. Rachel has the same glow, as does Roy Batty, as does Pris, as does Deckard. We never see humans with glowing eyes in Blade Runner. This was a coded piece of information that Ridley Scott went to great pains to include. The glowing eyes effect was not something they did in post. It had to be carefully constructed with the lighting and camera angles to achieve it. To say this effect was produced with deliberation, intent, and skill is self-evident. By including Deckard's eyes glowing in the shot, Ridley Scott is deliberately including him in the company of replicants. Make no mistake, Ridley Scott is something of a perfectionist. There are very few accidents in a Ridley Scott film. Indeed, while filming Alien, he insisted the crew of the Nostromo be utterly and completely immersed in their universe, even to the point of having the correct crew underwear during the shoot. This is one of the reasons why Ridley Scott's early sci-fi films are hailed as high-water marks of the genre. Scott cares about every aspect of production, and he is not one to wing it. Now, in future noir, some of the crew are claiming that Deckard's eyes glowing was an accident, that they had set that lighting for Rachel, and Deckard happened to get in that lighting and that's why his eyes glow. Well, setting aside the established fact at this point that Ridley Scott claims Deckard is a replicant, that he went to great pains to get the unicorn footage and even pulled unicorn footage from another source when the original footage was lost, and the fact that Deckard being a replicant is made clear at the end of the 1981 Fancher People's Draft, the fact remains that Ridley Scott went on to make no less than 2 more director's cut versions of Blade Runner, wherein he corrected certain errors in post, making his definitive statement on what Blade Runner is with the final cut. Scott went to enormous pains to correct the stunt woman shot when Zora gets shot in the back, for example. Ridley Scott wanted to put Joanna Cassidy's face over the revealed face of the stunt woman in the original release, and so he used motion control and CGI to frame by frame superimpose Joanna Cassidy's head over that of the stunt woman. It's a remarkable achievement of special effects that was not easy. So you can rest assured, if Deckard's glowing eyes were an accident that Ridley Scott disavowed, he would have fixed it in post. Compared to motion matching an actress's head in an action sequence, making Deckard's eyes stop glowing would be a snap. The fact that they are still glowing in the final cut means Ridley Scott has spoken. The eyes of replicants burn with an inner fire, visible in the right light. Perhaps there is even textual support for this idea in the script, when Roy Batty says,
"Fiery the angels fell. Deep thunder rolled along their shores, burning in the fires of Orc."
Was this a conscious choice, inserted by the writers or by Ridley Scott himself? In that analogy, the fiery angels are the replicants, fallen from heaven to earth and the pit. Is it any wonder that the eyes of these fiery beings burn bright with the fires of Orc? Central to the Deckard as replicant thesis is the notion that Gaff has seen Deckard's memory file, and that's why he knows to leave Deckard the unicorn origami as a message at his apartment. He has been there, he has seen Rachel, and let her live. But along with the unicorn, Gaff holds a sort of running commentary on Deckard throughout the film. Initially, Gaff holds an origami chicken to describe Deckard, ostensibly questioning his courage in Bryant's office. Although it may have a more subtle meaning, a chicken is a non-human creature, possibly alluding to Deckard also not being human. The second figure Gaff makes to taunt Deckard is a human stick figure, a caricature of a man. Sticks, straw, these things are not so far apart. Is Gaff saying that Deckard is a straw man, a crudely fashioned facsimile of a human? Although finally, towards the end, after Deckard is finished watching Batty die, Gaff says,
"You've done a man's job, sir. I guess you're through, huh?"
"Finished," Deckard replies. Gaff gives him back his gun, restoring power to Deckard symbolically, before he turns back and shouts,
"It's too bad she won't live, but then again, who does?"
At the end of Blade Runner, we are asked to question, what is sentience? What is consciousness? And it forces us to examine what it is to be human, what it is to be alive. Gaff at the end knows that Deckard is a replicant, and this is an important character arc for the film because it marks the moment when the human Gaff has expanded his definition of what it is to be human, or at least to be sentient and worthy of consideration. Respect. That's why Gaff lets Deckard and Rachel live. Just as moments before, Batty became real in Deckard's eyes before dying. So what are the arguments against Deckard being a replicant? One of the arguments is the notion that replicants have special abilities depending on their models. Roy Batty, Pris, Zora, Leon, each of them was created for a particular purpose with enhanced abilities. Deckard, to all appearances, has no such abilities, the argument goes, and since all replicants are specialized, Deckard can't be a replicant. To which I reply, hogwash. Rachel is a replicant, and Rachel doesn't have any special abilities, so why should Deckard? Indeed, if Deckard and Rachel were both designed to imitate humans perfectly and invisibly, to see if replicants can live among humans for extended periods without being detected, it would be vital that they not have any special abilities that could give them away. Another related argument against Deckard being a replicant goes, Deckard quit the police force. What kind of replicant does that? Don't be naive. Replicants could make wonderful deep cover agents, and in addition to kick murder squads on off-world colonies and pleasure units, couldn't some replicants be designed as deep undercover units created to pass as humans undetected? Presumably there are still political issues on Earth in 2019, maybe rival countries, maybe rival corporations. There could be a huge market for replicant spies, infiltrating foreign countries, corporations, private detective work. There are many reasons why the Tyrell Corporation might want to test deep cover replicants. If they were using Deckard and Rachel as experiments to see if replicants could be so perfect as to infiltrate human society without detection, they would want to step back and see how it all works out. If Deckard decided to up and quit his job at the police force, that wouldn't be a failure, nor would it be cause to decommission Deckard and eliminate him. Whatever Deckard did would be valuable data for the experiment. Tyrell is a very wealthy man and would certainly have the juice to pull strings and place Deckard wherever he wanted, even inside the police department. While most cops in the precinct wouldn't know about Deckard, certainly Bryant would need to know, and he probably brought Gaff in on the secret due to the emergency situation of escaped replicants on Earth. It makes sense then that if all replicants are designed with a certain function in mind, Deckard's function could be simply to pass as human. Thus, Deckard, like Rachel, would not need super strength, enhanced intelligence. In fact, any superhuman abilities would ruin the experiment. The point being, there are plausible reasons why Deckard as a replicant would not be superpowered like Roy Batty or Leon. Deckard, like Rachel, could be designed for more subtle functions. Early in the film, Rachel asks Deckard regarding the Voight-Kampff test, "Have you ever taken that test yourself?" To which he doesn't reply in a nice bit of foreshadowing by Ridley Scott. Perhaps Deckard and Rachel's purpose is to be more human than human. Nexus 7, no termination date. The issue being, can we plant them in human society with fake memories and have them successfully live and work around humans without being questioned by the humans and without questioning themselves? How well will their false memories hold up over time? These are things the Tyrell Corporation would want to know, and they have the juice to get the cops to play along with a duped replicant. Notice how Bryant looks so uneasily at Deckard when he says over time they might start developing their own emotional responses. Look at his expression in this scene. Sure, he could be uneasy about the replicants being on Earth, but you know, it could be he's uneasy getting so close to the truth about Deckard as well. It seems to me in that scene, he's watching him as if the idea of false memories might trigger something in Deckard and make him realize who he is. He's looking at Deckard almost like Deckard might be a bomb that could go off at any time. But aside from all that, the fact of the matter is Deckard's memory of quitting the Blade Runner unit may be false as well. And all the cops are pretending to know him as per their arrangement with the Tyrell Corporation. It makes sense they'd play along, since hunting replicants is dangerous business, and they'd almost certainly be delighted to have another replicant bear the brunt of that risk. Another point that got raised, Tyrell would know if Deckard is a replicant, but he doesn't say anything to Deckard about it. To which I reply, yeah, so? If Deckard is an undercover replicant, an experiment to see how a replicant fares in human society, not knowing what it is, then certainly Tyrell isn't going to spill the beans to the test subject. Indeed, throughout the scene between Tyrell and Deckard, Tyrell seems rather amused at the situation. He grins at Deckard with, seemingly, the condescending grin of a genius talking to a simple cop. But it could just as easily be the grin of a father talking to his son, or of a god talking down to his unwitting creation. But for me, beyond all of this, there's one more argument for Deckard being a replicant that I find perhaps the most compelling of all. I'd like to point out that Deckard and Rachel both being replicants makes a lot of sense out of an otherwise perplexing and disturbing scene, namely the so-called love scene between Rachel and Deckard. This is, on the surface, not a love scene at all. It's ugly and brutal and could well be interpreted as a full-out sexual assault. If Deckard is human, this is a really horrible scene of an innocent young woman being bullied into compliance with a sexual demand. But this scene becomes very poignant if you consider that this might well be Deckard's first sexual encounter as well. In the voiceover of the initial release of Blade Runner, Deckard says,
"Sushi, that's what my ex-wife called me. Cold fish."
It makes sense to me that Deckard's memory of his ex-wife was, like the unicorn, an implanted memory, a phony past designed to explain to the replicant how he came to be where he is, doing what he does, and why he's such an unfeeling bastard. The exposition in the narrative of his life. There was no ex-wife, and thus when it comes time for the love scene with Rachel, Deckard has all these stirring feelings he's never had before. A rush of hormones and strange unfamiliar sensations. Having no ex-wife and thus never having had a relationship before, perhaps never even having slept with a woman before. Thus, what seems to be violence on the surface of this scene is really overloaded emotions in an unfamiliar and upsetting situation, the fumbling first time of a child transitioning to adulthood. For me, this gives what is otherwise a disturbing and ugly scene a subtext that is poignant and tender. This scene, almost more than any of the others, convinces me that Deckard is a replicant. Because otherwise, what's the alternative? And so there you have it, my friends. The truth about Deckard settled at last. I have yet to hear a collection of arguments potent enough to counter the crushing preponderance of evidence pointing to Deckard being a replicant, including the unicorn dream, the glowing eyes, the fact that Ridley Scott himself says Deckard is a replicant, the fact that the unicorn footage was originally filmed for the original release but was cut at the demand of the financiers, the fact that Deckard being a replicant is in an original draft of the script, the fact that GAFF constantly alludes to Deckard being a replicant, it all adds up to Deckard being a replicant. And so he is. From the center of the earth, this is Dictor Van Doomcock bidding you all, my friends, stay angry. Ha 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 ha.